According to the Sentencing Project, the total number of incarcerated persons in the United States surpassed 2 million in 2020. 2,500 of those incarcerated are currently awaiting capital punishment or the death penalty, and that is as of October 2020. The state with the highest number of incarcerated persons is California, where over 700 incarcerated individuals are currently awaiting the death penalty. In the United States, the most commonly used form of the death penalty is lethal injection. Since the death penalty itself is a widely controversial topic in the nation, it's important to understand the history of the death penalty, or lethal injection more specifically, and why it is the most commonly used method of execution here in the United States. The concept of the death penalty has been around for thousands of years. Naturally, over time, different methods and different variations have been used in different countries. But currently, lethal injection is the most common form of death penalty here in America. Amanda Chu, a Juris Doctorate candidate from the Florida College of Law, states in her article titled "Lethal Injection, Constitutional Method of Execution" that the death penalty itself can be traced back to the most respected nations or empires of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. It was implemented as a way to heavy-handedly enforce compliance with the government policies. The concept of lethal injection, however, was not proposed until much later. Instructor Janelle Blanco, who has a master's in education, writes in her article titled "Lethal Injection, Definition, History, and Procedure." In the late 19th century, J. Mount Blier, medical doctor from New York, proposed a plan to inject inmates with a very high dose of morphine. Blier claimed that this was a more humane execution and is also cheaper than the electric chair, as opposed to being hanged or death by electric chair. The state of New York went on to use the electric chair method continuously instead of Blier's proposed method. Fast forward to the year 1977 in Oklahoma. A.J. Chapman, chief medical examiner of Oklahoma, proposed the same idea of lethal injection. His idea included the usage of 3 types of drugs, as opposed to just one type of drug proposed by Blier early on. The state of Oklahoma eventually adapted the idea of lethal injection. And later that year, in 1977, it was passed by legislation and made into their state laws. Even though Oklahoma was the first to adopt this notion, the first state to use lethal injection was Texas in 1982. Charles Brooks Jr., who was convicted of murdering an automotive mechanic, became the first person to receive lethal injection as capital punishment. He received a large dose of sodium pentothal, a barbiturate also referred to as truth serum, when administered in smaller doses. Since Charles Brooks, 33 additional states have accepted lethal injection as their main form of capital punishment, making it the most commonly used method of the death penalty in the United States. Also, since Charles Brooks, over 1,350 others have died by lethal injection as of January 2021, and that is according to the United States Department of Corrections. Some of those individuals include some very high-profile criminals, such as serial killer John Wayne Gacy and the Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh. According to the National Death Penalty Information Center, up until 2009, most states used a 3-drug combination for lethal injection. The first drug is used as an anesthetic, usually sodium thiopental. The second drug is pancuronium bromide, which is a paralytic agent. Lastly, the third drug is potassium chloride, which is essentially the drug that does stop your heart and causes death. 8 states in the United States only use 1 drug for lethal injection, and this is usually just 1 very large dose of an anesthetic, or a very large dose of fentanyl, which is a very strong synthetic opioid. But so far, the only state to use fentanyl is Nevada. 14 states use a large dose of pentobarbital, a barbiturate that commonly helps treat insomnia. Many states also use a combination of these 3 drugs. Although More recently, due to drug shortages, different states have adopted new lethal injection methods. Another commonly used drug would be mirtazapine, which is usually administered first to an inmate as a sedative. Death of the inmate usually takes 7 minutes or less after being administered a lethal dose of drugs, whereas other forms of capital punishment, such as the electric chair, can take up to twice as long, and it's also twice as costly, and it also can be ineffective. Although the death penalty is a hugely controversial topic, it is important to be able to understand the basic facts and history of lethal injection, the most commonly used method of capital punishment in the United States. And after you understand the concept, then you can decide whether or not you agree with the concept of the death penalty itself.